and welcome to Renew, the show about the College of Forest Resources at Mississippi State University. The College of Forest Resources promotes and enables the conservation, management, and wise use of our natural resources. I'm your host, Leslie Berger. Today's Renew show is going to feature one of the three departments within the College of Forest Resources, the Department of Wildlife, Fisheries, and Aquaculture. And here to represent that unit today is Dr. Steve Damaris, joining us from Skype. Hello, Steve. Thank you for coming.
My pleasure, Leslie. Thanks for having me.
I'm glad that you're able to join us. You have been involved with the Mississippi State University Deer Lab for a number of years, and have been doing research on white-tailed deer for a long time, and have really contributed to the body of knowledge that's out there about deer. For those that may not be familiar with the Deer Lab, could you just give me a little introduction as to what that is?
Yeah, a lot of people think the Deer Lab is a physical place, but really it's more like a think tank, a brain trust. It involves faculty at Mississippi State University and the College of Forest Resources who put our expertise together to answer important questions for landowners, hunters, agencies, pretty much anybody that has a question and a need to be addressed related to deer management, because white-tailed deer are hugely important to our state. Estimates of around $1 billion a year economic impact to our state just from recreational hunting. And that's not even including all the damages from injuries, vehicle collisions, crop damage, and all those types of problems. All the positives add up to about $1 billion. So deer, in particular white-tailed deer, are really important to the state, Leslie.
You're right, they are. And there's a lot of interest from our stakeholders, from our students. And so I'm really happy to have you on the show. And one of the reasons I'm excited about the timing of this particular filming is that deer season is just around the corner. Mississippi, as you mentioned, has a large number of deer hunters, and just really it's a popular game sport across most of the southeast and mostly its range. You've been involved in some research that's looking at deer movements. Could you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, one of the biggest issues that the State Wildlife Agency deals with mostly during and after the hunting season is complaints from the hunting public that, well, we don't have as many deer as we want. We're not seeing the deer. Something is wrong with your management program. And so the state agency funded this project to help to allow us to answer the question, how do deer deal with the hunting season, and why do hunters not see them as much during the hunting season? And so that allowed us this funding to put transmitting collars, essentially GPS collars, similar to your phone. It follows the deer around. It knows where it is over a couple of year period. And we had a large study area in central Mississippi along the Big Black River in Yazoo and Madison counties, about 60,000 acres. We had 55 adult bucks collared, and we've learned so much about how they move and how they respond to hunting pressure.
Yes, I can see that that's really is the way you would want to be able to answer those questions, to be able to follow them around like that. What are some of the key findings that you've learned?
Well, one of the first things we looked at is how are deer moving across the landscape, the 60,000 acre area. And so we wanted to measure movement rate. And there's a couple different ways to do this. One is called the total path length throughout the day. And so how far does a deer move throughout the day? And so for an example, if a deer at time one starts at time one, and then at time two, he's moved 70 yards away. And then at time three, he's moved another 100 yards. And then at time four, he's moved 30 yards. And that totals 200 yards of movement. And that's the total path movement. And then we also want to look at net displacement. That's the distance between the first and the last location of the day. And right. In this graphic that I have that I like to show people, that the net displacement, even though the deer moved 200 yards, the net displacement is only 100 yards away. So he may have come back to where he started or maybe not. And so we look at total path length and net displacement. And I have a graph that I also like to show showing total path length throughout the day, averaged across all these deer at different times of the fall and particularly during the breeding season. And in November and December, October and November, the deer are moving about 1,500 yards in a day. And that's about almost a mile, just a little bit less than a mile. And then during the rut, the breeding season, that distance increases about 50%. So they're covering now 1.5 miles in their daily movement. And that's not a lot of new news. We understand from past work that deer move around a lot and they increase their movements during the rut, males looking for breeding opportunities. But what was really exciting was when we looked at that net displacement value. A lot of hunters have this perception that they need to find where a deer is bedding, and the deer moves during the night and then they come back to this bedding area kind of early in the morning. So they think they're going to pattern this buck, find out where the bedding area is, and that's going to be the gold mine. Well, it turns out that our net displacement, even during the October and November season months, that net displacement is about 1,000 yards away from where they started out. So they're not coming back to the same spot. And then during the breeding season, they're covering 1.5 miles total path length. And then their net displacement, where they end up at the end of the day, is more like 1,500 yards away. So close to a mile from where they started the day, they end up the day. So the idea that they come back to this same bedding area every night is not true. So that's why a hunter needs to realize that if they pattern their buck to a general pattern of where they might be, they won't necessarily be there at the end of the next day. They have these other areas. They have multiple bedding areas throughout their home range, and they may end up at a very different location at the end of this day.
Right. Well, and that makes sense for an animal that's a prey species. Why would you return to the same place and allow a predator, i.e. a hunter, to figure out where you are? So whether it's a hunter or a mountain lion or a coyote or whatever might be preying upon a deer, to return to the same place every night is just giving that animal an opportunity to find you. And so what you explain makes perfect sense if you think about it from the deer's perspective. From our perspective, we like to go home to bed to the same place every single night. We don't like being in a new hotel every night, but not from an animal that's concerned about being found and eaten. So it's really cool when the science backs up some of the logic when you get to thinking about what that is. Were you able to see how the deer moved in response to the presence of people on the landscape?
Yes, that was a major portion of the study. And in this 60,000 acre study area, we had all of the hunters and landowners recording when they hunted. And so we knew which day they hunted and where they hunted across the landscape. And we broke this data into 3 categories. We looked at low risk days, moderate risk days, and high risk days based on the relative amount of pressure, hunting pressure. And so from the low risk days to the mid risk to the high risk, we saw some very significant changes in the use or selection of the natural habitats that the deer live in. A dramatic decline from their selection of an area. If there was a low risk day, they would be much more apt to be in that area. As the risk level of the hunter effort on the landscape increased, their use of that type of habitat declined dramatically. And it's almost a tipping point, if you would. They'll allow a certain amount of hunting pressure, a low risk day. They'll be in a lot of habitats that they're choosing, but as the hunting pressure increases, they start avoiding habitats, and they actually won't go as often or changed dramatically their use of habitats in response to hunting pressure. So they know that you are out there. And so what I try to tell hunters is don't go to the same stand. So many properties have these box blinds on a food plot, and they've been there for 20 years. And Uncle Joe hunted in this stand 20 years ago, and you've started hunting this stand, and there's been some good deer killed out of that stand. It's a good location generally, but the more you hunt a spot, the more the deer will avoid that spot.
Right.
They learn from the pressure.
Right. And again, it just makes
back
sense.
to their adaptations for avoiding predation.
Exactly. Right. That's what you'd expect. We're beginning to kind of get toward the end of the show here, but I want to be able, before you leave, to ask you, how do you take this kind of science that you're doing in the field and use it in the classes that you teach?
Oh, well, classroom instruction, I have to teach future biologists how to inform and manage hunters and deer. And so by understanding why and how deer move across the landscape, that will make them better biologists, as the biologists are going to be, in many cases, helping landowners improve their property for hunting opportunities. So understanding why deer move and how they respond to hunters can help us inform those management decisions. So I help students become better managers.
Right. And then you're just able to talk to them about how this technology that they're using to be able to follow deer has real relevance to more than just our phones. That technology there has relevance into getting us the information that we need to be able to make those kind of recommendations to landowners, to hunters, to agencies, to the biologist, the whole package. So I appreciate you sharing some of the research that you've been doing there at the Deer Lab in Department of Wildlife, Fisheries, and Aquaculture. I wish you the best as you move forward on that. Keep on collecting that good data and sharing it with us. And until we get a chance to meet again in person on campus, stay safe. For the rest of you that joined us on Renew, I hope you've learned a little bit more about the Deer Lab that is answering so many relevant questions for a very important species in the state of Mississippi and across the Southeast. I hope that you've learned a little bit more about how we can use our resources in a sustainable fashion for recreation, for enjoyment, and for sustenance. Until we meet again, I wish you the best. I've been your host, Leslie Berger, for Renew.